Hi guys, the Metal Maniac back again, and in this video, I'm gonna be listing off 10 bands that only have one good album. So yeah, let's begin. So first off, actually, first off is a band that uh the band I'm talking about is Testament. They only have one good album, and that's their debut album. I don't have it yet to hold it up, but I'm definitely gonna go get that at some point. But yeah, Testament is a band that went bad quickly. The first album is amazing. Definitely has some elements of new wave of British heavy metal kind of influence and stuff like that. It's also kind of melodic in parts. Overall, a fantastic album. But yeah, everything after that is just either boring or copying another band, which I'll talk about in a minute, or just downright stupid. They're other than their debut album, the rest of their 80s output sounds like they're copying Metallica, especially the era of Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning Metallica. It just sounds like they're copying Metallica, and they're not doing a very good job of it, and they just sound boring, like a boring, lame ripoff of Metallica. Even with the first 90s album of theirs, Ritual, and then in the 90s after that, they got weird. It's just a very bizarre, almost kind of Pantera-esque style for a couple of the 90s albums. And then by the time Demonic rolled around, it seemed like they were trying to do some death metal stuff, but were too afraid to go full-on death metal, too afraid of what the fans might think if they did. And yeah, it kind of went bizarre, and then they were back to the more Pantera-esque stuff the next album over, and then whatever after that. And then by 2008, they were more traditional thrash again, but with a little bit more modern production, a little bit heavier, but still kind of bland. And yeah, they pretty much stayed bland, and they're still bland now. But yeah, their first album, amazing. The rest, kind of just meh. Yeah, kind of just meh, and then sometimes bizarre, and then other stuff just kind of copying Metallica. But yeah. Alright, next band I want to talk about is Buzzard. Their first album is meh. Then this is their second album. They only have two so far. This one's really good. Very much crossover thrash meets doom metal in a way. But yeah, very good. Unfortunately, their first album is not that good. Hopefully, they'll have more good albums going onwards. Very hopeful for this band, considering this album is very good. But yeah. Alright. Next band, Fastway. Now, it could be argued that Fastway is not metal. They're more of sort of a light rock. And yeah, I guess so. I mean, this is the closest to metal that they've ever been. And maybe that's the reason why this is a good album. This album is both the soundtrack to the movie Trick or Treat, as well as Fastway's, I think, fourth album. Very good. Does a little bit lean towards sort of commercial rock from time to time, which kind of makes sense considering the rest of their stuff is more commercial rock than it is any type of metal. But yeah, this is the only one that's good. The rest of their albums, I mean, if you're a fan of commercial rock, then especially commercial '80s rock, then you'll like the other stuff. But with me, I'm not a fan of that. And this is really the closest thing to metal they've ever been, and maybe that's the only reason why, in my opinion, this is their only good album. But yeah. Alright, next band, Municipal Waste. This is a band that suffers from one major flaw. They are too afraid to break the mold and try something new and different. Other than this album, which is, it stands above because it is slightly more unique. I think the songs on it are very good, very memorable, and have each their own individual identity. Same thing with the EP, The Last Rager, but, I'm talking about full-length studio albums. In terms of full-length studio albums, this is the only good one. The rest just sound too much the same. Again, it seems like they're too afraid to try something new or different. They feel safe in this cookie-cutter formula that they've created for themselves, and just are stay in that, and that's the reason why the rest of their albums suck, because they're too much the same. But yeah, a very good album. Unfortunately, this is the only good full-length one they have. Alright, next up, Heist Earth. Now, Heist Earth is a very strange case. The rest of their albums, they're not bad, and actually, at times, certain ones are actually pretty cool. But for the most part, their other albums are just, they're too much, I wouldn't say too much the same, but they definitely feel like they're a little bit too afraid to try something that different. I mean, I say kinda, because their albums each do kind of sound kind of unique, but at the same time not different enough and not unique enough. Their other song, like, their first album is very odd. It has very bad production, so it's kind of hard to hear certain elements at times. Yeah, it's just weird, very boring but weird at the same time. Their I think two or a couple albums after that are just kind of meh. Burnt Offerings is just so boring. And everything else is just sort of weird and meh, and just why. But with Horror Show is very good. It's their, I think their first concept album, and it's very, very good. Or, no, I think actually their second one was this, I can't remember if this was before, that one with Ripper Owens. There were two with Ripper Owens, but the first one, what was it again? It was a war-related one. I can't remember exactly what the name of the album was. It was the one that has, the song, Institutional Day? What was it called? It was I think, it was a war-related one, a Civil War, related, I believe. Declaration Day. It was a song. It was the album that had the song Declaration Day on it. That was really the only other one that I found any sort of interesting. And it was the I think that was the first one to be a concept album, but I'm not entirely sure. I can't remember if that came out first or this did. But this is very good. I love the concept of the exploring almost like the universal monsters. Even though there's a song called Damien, which is about the Omen. It's not universal monster related, nor is the song Goes to Freedom, nor is the song Dracula, actually. The song Dracula is actually based on the movie Bram Stoker's Dracula, and not the 1931 Universal movie. And they also have a cover of the instrumental Transylvania by Iron Maiden, which isn't really that good. Um, but for the most part, this album's really great. I love the songs, Imhotep, Dragon's Child, Frankenstein, Dracula. Um, but yeah, this is really their only good album. The rest are just kind of meh. Yeah, there are certain songs from time to time on their other albums that are kind of interesting, but for the most part, their other albums are just kind of eh. But yeah, this one's really, really good. Unfortunately, this is their only, like, legitimately good album. But yeah. Alright. Um. Exhume. This is a great album. Okay, so going back to the beginning of their discography, they weren't really death metal. They were more like gore grind, death grind, gore metal type style that is just freaking weird. Like, they were weird. Their style was just so dumb, so very trend-setting kind of thing. What I mean by that is that it almost seemed like at that point in time, there was a really weird trend of style for death metal in the underground. Like, there was, like, the gore grind kind of thing that, was very trendy at that time. And it didn't sound good. The style was just so stupid. But they were that kind of style for quite a few albums in, and then all of a sudden they decided to move away from that to the more, standard death metal type thing, and it was meh. But then in 2017 they released this, uh, a death metal concept album that is just an amazing masterpiece from start to finish. Every single song is so good. The story is amazing. The fact that this is really the only death metal concept album I could think of that's in existence. Maybe there's more, but I haven't come across them. But this album's amazing, and it combines old school death metal with more melodic modern death metal. Very, very good. The band had some promising headway, and then they just went dumb. They went dumb because instead of going forward with this style, they went back to the more gore grind type shit from their earlier stuff that's just so bad. It's so bad, and I don't know why they decided to go back to that. Yeah, there was an album. I think it was either the one before this or the one before this. Like, I don't remember if it was the one before this or the one before that one. That's what I mean. And it was kind of hinting towards something like this. But anyway, I don't know why they decided to go back to their stupid gore grind stuff. Like gore metal. Gore metal. Wait, was that gore metal or no? It was a different one. It was like it was horror movie related type thing, but instead of keeping the elements that they had on this one, they went back to their earlier stuff, and it just sounds horrible. So they did something great, but then they went dumb. They went stupid for some reason and went back to the really stupid, just really crappy style that they had originally. Um, but yeah, so they had one moment of brilliance and then they ruined it. But yeah. All right. Next up, Anthrax. Oh boy. For some bizarre reason, everyone praises the Joey Bonadonna era of Anthrax. And to me, it's a weird phenomenon, considering that, in my eyes, Joey Bonadella's vocals are just average at best and kind of boring at worst. Like, And the style of thrash that they have with that era is just not that interesting, and it's very boring, and so many other thrash metal bands do it better. But early on in their career, very early on, they released Fistful of Metal, and they had vocalist Neil Turbin, and a very cool blend of thrash metal meets new wave of British heavy metal. And they killed it. They had something special. And this album proves that. But then, for one reason or another, very stupidly, they fired Neil Turbin, changed their sound, and hired Joey Benedella, and they lost all credibility in my eyes. Like, spreading the disease is decent, but it's nothing near the majesty of this. And it was one of those bands that unfortunately changed their style and vocalist and just lost something great. They lost something great that they had here. Yeah, I don't know. I'm in the minority on this, I know, but to me, they haven't released anything good past this. Yeah. Alright. Next band, Autopsy. Now, they had something special. It's not a fantastic album, mainly because there's a guitar riff, one single guitar riff that goes through the entirety of this album, which it's a nitpick of mine. I do like it, but at the same time, it's kind of annoying that they were that lazy that they couldn't write any other guitar riff and stuck with one throughout the entirety of the album. But besides that, this album is very good, very kind of slow and doomy type thing, for the most part. And, it's good for what it is. It's good for what it is, a standalone, pretty good death metal album with one slight flaw that, in my personal opinions, kind of bugs me at times. Sometimes I don't mind it. It really depends on my mood. But overall, pretty good death metal album. But they went stale very fast. I think after this, they just kind of lost their luster. Like, for some reason, the rest of their albums are just very boring and samey and just sound... They sound like they're not really doing that well. Like, they sound like they're uninspired, very tired, and just kind of too afraid to go out of their, safe little box. Kind of like with Municipal Waste. They found one style and one thing that worked for them, and they were too afraid to change it because they were probably too afraid of what the fans might think, and maybe some backlash if they even tried to do anything different. But yeah, they were good for one album, but after that they just went terrible. Mainly because they were too afraid to do anything different. But yeah. Alright. Next band. Power Trip. They have 2 albums so far. Their first album, Manifest Decimation, is an embarrassing debut album. Why? It's a total mess. The production is paper thin, the instrumentation is lazy, sloppy, and all over the place, and the vocals are drowned in the mix. Like, the instrumentation just overpowered the vocals. And it's just all over the place, helter-skelter, and just an all downright mess. But then they did something surprising. They released a second album, which is an absolute crossover thrash metal masterpiece. yeah, it's not like, yeah, there's two songs. Oh no, wait. One song that's kind of boring or just meh, but everything else is great on this album. Um, has some amazing catchy guitar riffs, very ferocious and very ferocious and very booming vocals. The vocals on this one are very much front and center. They're not drowned in the mix or anything like their first one. And just overall perfect or near perfect album, I should say. Unfortunately, their vocalist passed away recently, so it's a good chance that they might not continue and just quit. And on the very slim chance that they do continue and pick a different vocalist and go forward with their music. Hopefully they release more albums like this and less albums like Manifest Decimation. Um, Honestly, it's one of the it's one of the most embarrassing debut albums, but definitely not on the level of something like Rockarola by Judas Priest, because that's probably the pinnacle of embarrassing debut albums. Um, but yeah. Hold on, let me put this back really quick. Alright, last album from the last band, Massacre. Yep, Massacre. Um, it was surprising to find out that from this amazing debut album, they went downhill very fast. This is a very good example of thrash metal meets death metal. Like, this is a very thrashy death metal album. Um, Very, very good. Great vocals as well by Cam Lee. They released an EP after this, which is a little bit more streamlined death metal. Like, they lost the thrashiness that this album had. But, you know, that EP was also really, really good despite that. But as for the rest of their full-length studio albums, oh my god, what the hell happened? They went so weird. It's not like they just went, boring or anything. They went weird. Um, they released their second full length in 1996, and oh boy, what the hell is that? They they for some reason decided to lose a lot of the death metal elements and go a bit more almost emo metal in a way. Hold on, let me put this back really quick. All right. Um, Alright, so yeah, they went what I could describe as emo metal. Like, they did have somewhat of a death metal-y kind of vocals on their second album, but not really. The music was sort of, like, the musical style was definitely bandwagoning on the trend of metal at that point in time in the 90s. They went a little bit more, I wouldn't say industrial, but they went kinda like that. The reason why I say they're more emo metal because the album feels very pretentious. Like, it feels very like a mood. Like, it feels very much like I'm dreary, kind of mopey, kind of, individual that, lives in, like a teenager living in a basement, very sort of moody, kind of like that. That's the kind of feel that album gives off. The second album, very much, trying to market more towards the grumpy teenager, adolescent kind of group. And yeah, and it went worse after that. Like, they took a long hiatus. Like, they took a very much long hiatus, and then I think, what, 2018, I believe, they released their third album. Now, Ken Lee did not return. He left the band after their second album, most likely because he realized how far the band had fell and that they were not going to go anywhere. They were not going to do anything else that was going to be good. They released a third album, and the guy they got for the vocals is really bad. Like, they got someone who looks and sounds very much like George Fisher from Cannibal Corpse, but not as good. Pretty much a discount George Fisher, by the way. And yeah, I mean, not only did they get someone who would on a different in a different band would sound actually really good, but someone who has a style of death metal vocals that just doesn't fit this band. Rick Roz's guitar work is almost unrecognizable. Like, he's known as, especially back then, in the 80s and late 80s and 90s and stuff, for his guitar work is very, whammy bar centered, and just very sporadic and stuff. Well, on the new album, it's not that at all. It's very different, very unrecognizable, and very unlike his guitar playing. The production is very stale. Not stale. Bleh. Stale. I don't know. What's the correct word? Sterile. That's it. Sterile. Very sterile. Very stark. Very manufactured sounding. And all in all, the songs are very much cookie cutter modern death metal, very safe, as it were. They didn't try to do anything, interesting or new. And that new album, is pretty much trying to bank off the success of their first album. Yeah, the band is not like it used to be, and they haven't released any good full-length albums since their debut. But yeah, very unfortunate. But yeah, so that's about it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you all next time.